So I was doing that in high school, and that's around the time when Greg Gibson introduced me to Jack Burnman.
I was just about to ask about Jack.
And Jack Burnman was an incredible card man and a real eccentric, a real original. Good news is it looks like there might be some movement on a Jack Burnman project.
Good.
So that's all I'll say about that, but cross your fingers at home, because that's something.
Now, how are you going to be actively involved in that project?
I would imagine if I'm asked, I will be.
Yeah, well, I hope you get asked.
Well, I hope I get asked too.
Whoever's got movement on that should definitely involve you.
Yeah, well, so I was very fortunate because Jack had two different kinds of things that he was really famous for. One, he had a lot of interesting mathematical magic, and he also had this totally unique sleight system. And what I learned from Jack, even before I knew any rules, was I learned that you could break rules. And so it was right after my very first visit with Jack that I developed the one-handed popover. And the Zach trick that I did for you that was the first thing I ever came up with when I was 17 years old. I was in high school. And we had to get something published for our senior year of high school. We had to try. And I had just it was the first time that the Hooker Rising cards was on the cover of Magic Magazine in 1994, January 1994. And I opened the trick section, and this is a lot like what it must be like to release a download now from, a Pigwin, and, have that experience of seeing your name in lights, And I opened up Richard Kaufman's trick column, and it said Larry Jennings, Martin Gardner, Aaron Fisher. And I just was like, I was so happy. I just couldn't even tell you how happy I was. It was the biggest deal ever to me. And that was high school. And then the night before I was so busy practicing magic, I only got into state schools. And toads. And so I went to a place called Towson in Baltimore. Now, I didn't realize that DC had nothing in terms of cardmanship of a certain old lineage kind of thing, to Baltimore,
right.
Which was, Baltimore is a heavy old magic city, heavy East Coast old magic city. From way back in the way back. I feel like we're like in some kind of dystopian apocalyptic discussion about, before there used to be magic shops. You would go in before the Great Burning. So the night before my first day of class, I'd heard that there was a new magic store in Baltimore. And so I called the guy up, and it was Denny Haney, and it was 7 o'clock at night. And I was like, what are your hours? And he's like, oh, I'll be here all night. You want to come hang out? And I was like, yeah, I want to come hang out. I stayed in that magic shop with him and his pig until... That's right, I said pig.
Yep.
Who's walking around. The pig is walking around the store. When the first time you see that pig come up on you, what happened to your dog, man? So I stayed in Denny's store till 5 a.m. in the morning, and it was just like, for me, it was so much. I mean, look, there was no magic store to stay at Al's. I mean, DC's not, they call Baltimore Charm City for a reason. Mm-hmm. It's got a certain frothiness to it, Baltimore, and cheap beer. It's frothy, and I used to go in there and haunt that place hard because I was really starting to practice a ludicrous amount. I mean, after that little bit of encouragement I got from that Magic Magazine article, I started to decide to practice a lot. And then Denny, after a couple weeks, he had to find something to do with me because because he was a stage guy and I didn't want to hear anything about it. I was not coachable, and
for stage,
or even close up at that point. I was like into the moves,
right?
And but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so that's when he found Peter,
the young punk move monkey. That's what I remember. I remember our first meeting. You remember our first meeting?
Oh yeah, you want to do that one?
Yeah, let's do that one. You tell the story how you first met me.
Well, we were at Fechter's. It was 1990.
What's Fechter's?
I don't know. How would you describe Fechter's?
Fechter's is the invitational only for the upper echelon of close-up performers in the world, and you were invited.
And I was like 18. I was very excited to be there, and happy. And Dan, who I just heard of cartoon and you had some DVDs out. What were they called?
Oh yes, it was Magic with Rubber Bands.
Magic with Rubber Bands. Now, I was, kind of a purist and into card magic. I can't believe we're telling this story. Yeah. And I was sitting at my table, and I forget who I was with, and that was the same weekend I met Lee Asher. I mean, it was a big, auspicious weekend, as it turns out. And I turned to Dan Harlan, and I said, "Hey, man, are you the band shark?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm the band shark." And he had his bracelets. He's ready to jam. And I was like, "All right, band shark, what's your deal?" And he's like, "I'm going to come over there, kid, and I'm going to beat your ass," magically. And he did like 15 minutes of rubber band magic, and I, before or since, have not ever really had an experience like that with rubber bands. And it was so magical, it was so powerful, and I was just like, "All right, man, I'm sorry I spoke to you that way, I apologize." Awesome. Then, a year later, he called me up and asked me if I wanted to
move to Vegas,
move into his spare room and move to Las Vegas and live the art life. Mm-hmm. And so, as they say, the rest was history. But it's interesting. It was really interesting, auspicious meeting that day.
Yeah, an important one, because that's the thing. Aaron had ego. He still has an ego. We all should have an ego when we're good at anything that we do.
Not me.
But you've also got humility. You balance it. You know the people that have influenced you and what's been good for you, and you've learned from everybody that you've met. I know all along the way. And not only just within magic, you also learn from all of the influences that you let into your life. As a full and artistic person, you're learning some music right now, and I know you're heavily influenced by music.
Yeah, big time.
You'd love to go to music festivals.
Yeah, I think, David Copperfield said something once about how music and Fred Astaire was a bigger inspiration for him than magic. And I remember at the time we used to sit around and go, "That's lame. David wouldn't even mention another magician." That's how we felt, right? Why won't he mention another magician? And it's so funny just to look at the situation now, and I definitely, when I think of a good band, a good improvisational band, because the kind of magic I like to do, which is not, it's you don't see, everybody doesn't do the same kind of magic. And the kind of technique that I'm talking about is designed to be sort of a conversation with the audience. It's designed to open it up and be totally dynamic. There's a lot of magicians you see that if you were to say, "Excuse me," in the middle of the show, they'd be like, "Excuse me, I'm in the middle of a sequence, and I will get to you when my sequence is over." So the whole thing that we're doing here is designed to sort of be improvisational. And I think that came for me from, when I look at bands like the Grateful Dead and things like that, which is a jazz band, a rock and roll jazz band. But it's all designed to be fluid, and they play the songs in whatever order is pleasing to them and the audience in this time and in this space. Now, magic's a little bit different because you really have to lock down the structure for reasons that we were talking about quite a lot tonight. You got to lock down the structure because it won't be deceptive otherwise. And so the improvisation doesn't work the same way. So when I try and actually do close-up magic with people, it's really all about that improvisation. So to me, the effect itself and the structural moments are pillars, and then the whole thing is about getting an interactive space in between that. And I think a lot of that came from music, and magically a lot of it came from Mead.
Eric Mead?
Yeah, it was Eric Mead who's really, just was so inspirational to me when I went up to the Tower Bar and got to see him work and perform, and he put me behind the bar, and I was terrified, and it was just amazing. But I learned watching Eric that magic can be like that if you have the courage to let it breathe.